Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to another one of Analytica's Customer Chats. And today I'm delighted to be joined by two people from Ivanti. So we've got Jamie Whalen, the Director of Social Strategy, and Sal Viveros, the Head of Global Corporate Communications and Risk Comms. So a very warm welcome to both of you, if I can say that, on a Friday.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Aren't you lucky we turned up on a Friday, right? Most people.
Exactly. I was expecting a couple of no shows, to be honest. So we normally do this on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but we thought we'd try it on a goes. I'm sure everyone's having a bit of downtime on a Friday and is listening to this. You should get a lot of inspiration in terms of B2B influence marketing. So for all the listeners out there, please say hello and tell us where you're tuning in from. And would love to hear any questions if you want to post them on the comments, and I'll put them to Sal and Jamie and keep them on their toes. So just to kick off, Jamie, it would be lovely to understand a bit about your background and also how you got into influencer marketing, because it's not always something that people sort of choose to do for years and years. It tends to be that people kind of fall into it. So it would be amazing to hear your journey of how you've arrived doing influencer marketing.
Yeah, of course. So a little of my background, I am Boston based. So I'm, really happy. I've been here for a while. I lived out in California for a couple of years as well. But I actually started in my career really actually at a small startup that worked with Roald Dahl. So I used to do a lot of editorial work and always content, and social kind of stuff, right? Throughout my career, I worked with a lot of different companies. We're always in marketing. And I always loved the potential we had, right, of great content amplification of it, right? But as I knew in my career really early on, great content is just great content without the right kind of effort and amplification aspect behind it, right? I've created every piece of content, I've written the blog, I've been up all night correcting things and making it perfect to, come up to the morning and going, well, is it going to get out there? Are people going to hear my voice? And it was such a core component, I think, of, the startup where I was. That as I grew in my career, I worked with a couple of different agencies and different tech companies. And that was something that was really important to me is how do I amplify great content and really raise a brand's awareness? And that's really where influencer marketing was kind of that next level, that next step, right? It's great, like I said, to have great content, but I've been the content creator. I've, been that person from day one. Both my degrees are in journalism, right? I've written every single thing. And for me, the next level of that is making sure that the right people know how amazing the content you have is. So influencer marketing was that next step, right? Giving our brand kind of that voice it deserved. And I really think it's just probably the writer in me. I just want to make sure that that voice is heard. And right now, the voice I think is really important, is really the Avanti brand voice. So it's a
Yeah,
little bit about me.
thank you so much for that intro. And I guess all those late nights. I mean, hopefully now you can leverage influencers and then they amplify it, and you can get some more sleep.
I don't know about that, Tim. I've got 3 kids, so sleep is a thing that
Yeah,
kind of comes and goes. It depends on the week.
yeah.
So
I've got a couple of kids, so I can totally understand that at the moment. Sal,
Yeah,
would love to know a bit about your background, and I know you've been doing influence marketing for quite a number of years now. Would be really interesting to hear how you stumbled across it or chose it.
yeah. So my background is luckily I grew up in California where there was a ton of startups. So had got really good experience with a couple small startups that grew largely, and then I started my main career at McAfee doing security. So started out in product management, then product marketing, then comms, so kind of all kinds of roles. And it was there that I first started learning kind of testing influencer marketing, really trying to see if there was really the goal was to find an authentic way to reach new audiences and really trying to identify who of these influencers were reaching the people I wanted to get to that I couldn't necessarily get to. But it wasn't really till AWS and then obviously working with Analytica that we started to put a real program together. And there I really started the influencer program for all of EMEA for AWS. And so it really grew as a pretty good program. And since then, I brought that program over to Ivanti. And then we've just kickstarted at the beginning of the year. So I've been here, just over 7 months. And so, we're just starting to grow the program here. But again, I've seen huge value in leveraging influencers.
Great, thank you so much. And would you say that the program emanated from real business problems of not being able to reach those new audiences, or would you say that it just emanated from the evolved nature of marketing, just trying to optimize and trying something new?
Yeah, so for me, it was the media landscape was changing. All right, so we were seeing a huge change in how people were taking on information, what information they were bringing, what they were looking at. So social media became much more important. And what we found is some of the influencers we were trying to work with had larger reach, better engagement with some of our core targets. So I was really trying to understand what was happening in the market, and the influencers was that ideal place, right? They had authenticity, they had engagement, and really they were targeted. So, again, with the B2B influencers, there's certain of our influencers that are really, really, I guess, have credibility within security or whatever market they play in. And it's really important to get in front of those people and really build those relationships.
So
Yeah.
it was the observation of some of the metrics and just knowing that things were evolving and just trying to keep up with the kind of latest, to be able to drive the impact.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was that. I also think too, we wanted that humanistic touch, right? People don't want to talk to robots. They want to talk to people, right? They wanted that, that connection. I think that there's something that's really beautiful that, all day long, right? As these different kind of channels are changing, there's monetization that you're dealing with, there's paid ads, there's so many things, right? Consistently algorithms that are changing. As an influencer part, though, that's a connection, right? That's a connection that we can start to build. It's something that will change, yes, and evolve, but I think in a different form. And I think it's more of a relationship than something that we do on a day to day. And I like that so much more to me. Maybe it's because I'm a people person, so maybe that's kind of where it stems from. But I think there's something so more powerful when someone really believes in your brand and is authentic and can have that human touch versus just a kind of a play on a paid approach.
Yeah, it's extremely powerful, isn't it? And just hearing both of you talk about it, I mean, I think anyone would be sold on the concept. I'd love to understand your journey in terms of educating senior management and the kind of reputation that influencer marketing has internally. Because, and I think you were talking about it, Sal, when you were in comms, you were looking at influencer marketing, and sometimes the word influencer and marketing, when people are in comms roles and they think about influencers as B2C plays, can obviously be problematic internally with how people explain the programs and the benefits. So I would love to hear at Ivanti um, how influencer marketing is viewed internally, and also how you talk about the program when you're talking to senior management.
Yeah. Sal, you can start on this one or I can. I
You can
do know
start on
that.
this one.
So we have a term. I'm sure it's going to be coined after this. So I'm sure our CMO is going to love this one, Melissa. But we have a term inside called business to human, right? B to H, right? Not just a B to C, not just a B to B, those kind of terms. She really wants to have a business to human touch, right? So when we even think about influencers, we always think about how our business operates, right? What's the story of the business and the actual culture we have here, right? So for us, when we actually had the strategy and we kind of sold it to the executives, right, and explained to them how important and integral this was, we really kind of made sure that we foundationally had a strategy behind it that made sense to them. And to them, it was about that, really reaching that human touch, right? What we do is so important on a day to day, but I think it's really important as we evangelize it and get the right people that it makes sense to the brand. So when Sal and I got together, and we created their beautiful deck, right? As anyone who works in marketing, they've been in, I call it not deck hell, but deck moments where you're just like, what deck is it that you need from me and what version, And I
On
remember when
slide 58 or 60,
your
because
eyes are bleeding and you're like, I
that,
need to be more creative. What visual can I get?
yeah,
Um,
especially when you might have 5 or 10 minutes only to present it, because you don't know whether they're going to turn up late or anything like that. So,
Exactly, exactly. And we were a little sneaky, I'm not gonna lie, in the way that we presented it. And not sneaky in a way, it was we made it, make sense to them and why it was important not only for the brand health, but the holistic health of everyone, right? And how it would raise everyone's awareness. So when we really created their strategy as well as other strategies within the business, influencer marketing was always a part of it. It was, a tactic that could really help us reach that KPI we were trying to inform. So I think that was honestly one of the core concepts, right, Sal, that helped us really evolve this. And when we actually had a conversation with them, they'd already been hearing about it, right? So it wasn't something new. It was already something that they had heard about. in past conversations. And then this was now a tactic that we needed to utilize to achieve what we were trying to kind of hit from a business goals perspective. So for us, it was kind of a soft sell, right, in the background a little bit, making sure that it was always part of that bigger plan. And then we really worked on the kind of other plans, right? That was always part of it. So I think it's really making sure that it's conversational, right? That it's not something new to them, that it makes them feel comfortable. And then you really go in with really adequate numbers and what you're trying to achieve and how it will really help the business, not just what it will do itself, how will it help the business goals and how will we reach that together? So I think that's really how I think I was kind of really able to do that. And once we got that, honestly, it was like this autonomy for our team that felt really great. Sal, I think you and I can both say that it's a beautiful connection. It's like this kumbaya, right? Because once they see the opportunity, it has, then it's a really good space. And I think, to be honest, though, Sal really led a great opportunity with the Ever Workplace report we did recently, Tim. And it was a great example, right, of showing them the value of it, presenting the strategy to them, and then seeing that strategy come to life with the influencers we utilize. So I really think that's how we sold it. We showed the opportunity, we showed, the proven results. We were able to show the proven results. And now I don't know if we can do it without it, to be quite honest. I think it's going to be hard to kind of do it without that as a tactic. So.
Yeah. And I mean, luckily I had convinced Melissa, our CMO, on the value of influencer marketing. And so again, I was able to show the metrics that we'd achieved, together at AWS, taking from a 40% share of voice during a time period to 70% share of voice when we were using key influencers. I mean, when you have those kinds of numbers, it's a pretty easy business case. But additionally, again, like Jamie said, it's the human touch. We do want to be, business to human, because at the end of the day, you may be a CIO, you may be a CTO, but you're always going to be human. So if you can get kind of that human touch in there, and really that's where influencers help you, right? They have that credibility, they have that engagement, they have the trust from their followers. So I'm really trying to, it wasn't super hard convincing them once we showed them the business case. And now, there's a whole program for our executive leadership team. So it's great.
Yeah.
Sorry, go for it, Jamie.
No, I was going to say the one other thing that happened through it too, really, which was kind of exciting, is that relationship building that we were able to do with one of our executives. So we'd had one executive that was supposed to do something, they were not able to do it, and another executive stepped in. And I'm probably getting ahead of myself here, but it was kind of felt like a dating game, right? So not every influencer connection is going to work, right? Or it's not always going to, pan out, but we were able to really pivot really quickly. Shout out to one of my favorite shows. So Pivot. But once we were able to pivot, we were able to get another executive. We were able to get them that visibility also, right? And get them to connect to someone that they didn't even know about. And now they're having conversations, they're going back and forth. They have a podcast and a Twitter chat, things that, just feel so much more realistic. So I also say, when you're starting it too, make sure that you have a couple different options, and make sure that you can pivot quickly and don't get discouraged, because something that could seem bad will actually could be a really good thing in a different way, So for us, it was really great because we were able to have a connection with an influencer who was so wonderful that to prove it to the executives was a great thing. But when we got them connected, it was just a beautiful thing. So yeah, I don't know. And we have something coming up with them too. And it was just, now they're talking back and forth. And I mean, that's the perfect connection. That's what you want to have happen. And, we were able to do it basically because we made the right connections, in that right relationship that, they went on that second date and it worked out really well. So I think it's important to say that too, right? That it's not going to happen overnight. It takes time, and it's a relationship you're building versus, like I said, pay by play or, a paid approach. It's a very different type of mental approach that you have, that business to human that we're kind of, talking about. And I think, we utilize it every day, and we talk to all of our influencers that's really what we want to have, holistically as a goal.
So I love a number of things you've said, and Harold Sinners has joined the conversation. I know that he's someone that both of you know. So hey, Harold, and there's some other comments from Joel and Naringa. I love what you've just both said, because influencer marketing has been heard by a lot of CMOs, a lot of senior management. Obviously, it's a term that people are familiar with, but they don't quite know how to connect it to the business goals. So I love it that first of all, there was a mantra of business to human where it could play and align so well with that. But then you were obviously able to bring data as well, and then prove the relationships, not just on a influencers promoting some really great content that you're or creating and promoting content that you've produced, but also the relationship with senior execs, because they get to see the kind of personal relationship and they've got the anecdotes as well. Because I think 40% to 70% share of voice is amazing for a CMO, but once they actually meet some of the influencers, I think that really sort of drives it home that they can sort of see exactly how that can evolve, throughout the whole journey. So I think you basically combined all of that, into your conversations, which I think is really impressive.
We're
And
trying it. We're
Yeah,
trying here, right? So we're
it's an
trying.
ongoing program.
yeah, but I think a lot of people struggle with this. So I think that's part of why I do these customer chats is to try and sort of stop and help people look back in terms of what they've achieved, because there are a lot of brands trying to fight for like why influencer marketing, and there's just so many benefits to it. But if people are just trying to do leads, for example, then they're just measuring leads, and sometimes all of the other sort of quantitative and qualitative benefits of influence marketing get lost.
Yeah.
And so years later they start talking about how they should have built the brand up, and sometimes that has been lost along the way with obviously the sort of quarterly budget cycles. So I think that's really impressive what you've done there. Can you tell us a bit about about your program? I know that there's the big piece of research that you pushed out,
Yeah.
which went down extremely well. There's obviously the executive leadership team. There's hundreds of influencers you're tracking and looking at some of the insights there. Could you talk a bit about the program components and how it works?
Yeah, so I'll start this one, and then Jamie can jump in. So again, as you know, we started the program, and one thing I recommend is to anyone who's thinking about jumping in, start small. Pick a number of core influencers that you want to work with and try to build out those relationships. Trying to expand too quickly with too many relationships, I think it becomes challenging, and you kind of lose attention to some of them. But we recently launched our Every Workplace report, and so we really targeted 4 core influencers to partner with us. And as part of this, they fed into the overall research, into the report, and then they also helped amplify it. Additionally, we did a broadcast media tour where we used our influencers like Harold to be part of that. So they were part of the TV and radio interviews that we did. And with the satellite media tour, we reached 40 million viewers on the various news channels that we were part of. So it's really making sure that there's benefit for not only the organization, but the influencer, making sure that it's a partnership that works for both. Additionally, with that same kind of outreach, from the websites, we had 691 million potential views from that. So the numbers are huge from these types of opportunities. But again, one of the main reasons we were able to get these TV interviews because we offered someone from Ivanti and an influencer, so we had a balanced story. So again, there's opportunities are huge. I'll let Jamie talk about the rest of the program.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't do without Sal, though. I think Sal is, he's really helped this program, right? He really makes sure that we're looking and thinking about everything in a different format, not just one-sided, which I think is the most beautiful thing too about this game, right? Influencer marketing. And I push all the programs that I work on, right, is to really close your eyes and think of every potential opportunity here, right? Not just one. Don't just think about a podcast with that influencer. Don't just think about them liking something. Don't just think about one. Think about it as every possible opportunity that could possibly happen, right? And it could be now, it could be a year from now, it could be another opportunity. But that's what I love to challenge. One of the reps we work with, Joel, who is awesome. He, I ask him all the time and I push him all the time on things, right? I really want to make sure that we're always thinking through every single opportunity. We're doing something coming up and it's always thinking about every single opportunity with this influencer so that it does feel like that, a relationship. It doesn't feel like hey, we had this really nice chat and then, maybe we'll talk to you again. I want it to feel, back and forth. So I think that's something that's really important to me. And, Sal's been really great about thinking about all these things too, right? So I think it's really great to have a team with different ideas too, to make sure that your influencer program is successful. It's that differences of each other, right, that really help make sure that it is optimized to its full extent. But to your point, and I know your full question, Tim, was really about the different programs we have that run for our influencers. So we do have kind of one that we're running, really, it's core of our executive leadership team type program, right? So it's a really core component of what we're doing. There's some really great back end stuff. I won't completely talk about all the details, but it's something that's really important to our brand, because once you can raise, your executive leadership teams, their presence, right, and their brand value and their brand health, as we like to call it, right, from a back end kind of analytics perspective. I'm sure we've all seen that, right? Then you can really start to raise your own brand's health, right? And they start to believe in it and start to engage in it. And before you know it, it's this beautiful kind of back and forth that you just wouldn't naturally have, right? So we're starting to help build that for them. And I think it's a really beautiful kind of experience for us, because we're not just thinking one, linear kind of thing. We're thinking holistically in different parts and different kind of components of the influencer program. To your point, Tim, I think when you think of an influencer program, think about that. Think about the different areas, right, within your business that could utilize it. And think big, don't think small. Don't think one little thing you're going to do. Think about all of the opportunities and write them down, and then work with someone amazing like Joel and say, how is this going to happen, Joel? How are we going to make this happen? From like a Jerry Maguire perspective, right? Help me help you, right? And we'll all make it work. Because I do love that movie, right? So I think I use his quote all the time. They're going to start paying me, I swear to God. No, but in all actuality, I really do believe that, right? I think it's about us challenging each other too, Tim, right? Your Analytica team challenging our team, right? And saying, are you thinking about everything, every opportunity? Joel has helped us really think through different things too that we wouldn't naturally have thought through. And we really appreciate that. So I think that's something that really has helped our programs succeed, because it's not just one person in that team, it's all of us playing together, and thinking the best. So I think that's really helpful as well.
I think those are amazing points, and we're going to try and get as many film quotes in as possible. Obviously, or Jamie's going to do that. I think by herself. I don't know enough film quotes, so I'm not going to contribute to that. But I love everything that you're saying, and with the largest global tech brands, there's often a challenge with who owns the program, and that there's someone in employee advocacy, there's people in exec comms, which are exec assistants contributing to that, or comms are owning the exec comms, and what is digital or social comms you're doing in influencer marketing, and what's the crossover? Is it account-based marketing, or is it more kind of brand awareness? Is it trying to drive leads? There's all these kind of problems and sort of nuances internally. It seems like both of you have got this pretty centralized, where you can start looking at, what more could we be doing, or where could the program feed into, which is pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so as part of our planning process, luckily, I handle PR, AR, and social media, so it can be more integrated, I think, than it was at AWS. There was a constant component of how many leads are we driving through the funnel, and here we're outside of that kind of area. We obviously assist with that, but again, I think anyone who's thinking of doing it, just be aware that it should be part of everyone's marketing mix, whether it sits in the lead generation or in communications or wherever it sits. There's just real value from working with these influencers, especially if you want authentic interactions. Again, that whole B to H, business to human, because again, these influencers already have that relationship with their followers. They followed them for a reason. They trust them. They have credibility, and that's so difficult to have in today's market. And it reaches places where your standard marketing mix may not reach, or it may enhance that. I think it's important for any organization to, if they haven't started a program, to start looking at it.
Yeah, we've also, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Well, Jamie, I was just going to ask you, because you were so focused on the long-term relationships, and I love that, because a lot of brands are focused on the quick wins and the kind of 3-month campaigns. And I wanted to ask you about how you sort of got that buy-in for long-term your partnership building internally, and also you mentioned starting off with a handful of influencers, but I know you're looking to scale that up. What you think is going to be required to to scale up to, engage, maybe 30 influencers in the future, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do want to hit one point and then I will definitely go into that. I know, Sal, you hit a thing, and so did you, Tim, about employee advocacy, right? It's a core component actually of, I know you said, Tim, kind of, yes, we get it all under one. We also manage our brand employee advocacy program here, right? So a core component of it, for every example, we have something coming up, we have our employees invested in it as well, right? So helping to really extend that reach. So I definitely wanted to add that. If you are thinking of the program, right, think about that too as well, right? And think about your employee advocates as also influencer advocates. Maybe that's a new thing to think about, but I think of it that way too, right? Anything that we're working with them, right? They've become kind of part of our family, I would call it, right? So now our employees should also advocate for it. So I think that's something that, we're starting to really bake in. I know we only started a few months ago and, we have so much further to go, but I definitely would say, as you're thinking about that too, and, obviously it's going to run through your social team or your PR team or where it's going to run through, make sure that your employee advocacy program is also supporting that. That they're aware of what your influencers are doing, because I think that's a core component as well. Once people are on board, you're going to build so many more relationships. And Tim, to your point, how I think we're going to scale is this. I explained to my, executives, we think about really starting to follow and think about different types of influencers. And I say it in this simple term. You go buy an ad, right? And you see something and you're like, yeah, that's great. But you go buy an ad and you engage with something. That's a very different conversation. And what I'm starting to do and really help them, and as we start to scale, really, Tim, is thinking of that, right? Instead of just scrolling through something and seeing normal conversations, you're going to start seeing meaningful conversations that are very, integrated into your keyword objects, objectives and things you're thinking about. And that's what we're trying to build for that kind of plan as well, right? So they feel like they're being supported. And all of a sudden, as I explain it to you, is they're going to see something that they wouldn't naturally have seen before. They're going to go, oh, wait, I should totally get involved in that. Oh, wait, and I think that at the end of the day, even from an awareness perspective, that's going to really evolve, I think, our team. And I think that's how we're going to scale because, you start small, you start showing them these small wins. I had actually one executive reach out the other day and they said, hey, I think I know this person. And they started to have, a conversation with me on Twitter and about this and that. And, what should we do? And to me, I literally could have jumped out of my seat because I said, that's exactly what's supposed to happen. That's the things that are supposed to happen. Those are the moments that are supposed to happen because now you're going to start having this conversation and it's going to be more than just a small win. It's going to be, a relationship. And to me, that's how I hope we scale, is getting those small wins and them seeing it. And then, we'll just kind of keep going from there. But I think sky's the limit if we can get, their buy-in and they can see that little win,
Yeah, I love that because obviously in the boardroom when you're talking to senior management, it's all about maybe share a voice or talking about like awareness or top level engagement. But actually, it's the stories, isn't it, that come out when execs build these wonderful relationships with peer external advocates and influencers, and just get a real kick out of it and just kind of see how the world is evolving and how they can communicate on a different level. And that's a really satisfying thing for the program, isn't it? Because once it starts, building impetus internally, then, if you can leverage, tens or hundreds or thousands of employees in that way, then, it's basically your army of content creators, isn't it? Back to your original point, Jamie, of you staying up really, really late and like writing copy and then thinking, how do we promote it? If the employees and influencers are creating content by themselves, then both of you can maybe can go on vacation more often or sit back and watch the metrics go up. But Sal, I know that you're a big advocate of the employees and external influences, and what do you think it takes for this to become something that kind of happens naturally rather than being more programmatic?
Well, I mean, once you start educating everybody the value of it, becoming not only a brand ambassador, but it's a personal brand thing. And once you start kind of getting them in the habit, you can really see that's when like the organic growth really starts taking off. People start building their own relationships with influencers we may have not touched yet, right? And educating them. So it just really is kind of that multiplier effect. And it's again, right now there's a lot more credibility with many of these influencers than there are with some media outlets. And so really trying to understand that there's been a shift in the overall kind of where information comes from. I think it's important to know.
Yeah, I think that last point, that's really interesting how things have evolved over the past few years. And you talked about you being responsible for PR, AR, and social media in your role. How do you see the kind of landscape with journalists, analysts, and what a lot of people say are quote unquote influencers? How do you see the kind of roles of these people in terms of their impact and whether they act in a similar way or whether they're kind of managed in a completely different way?
Yeah, I think we take a pretty similar take to all of them now. They're all important. They all have value. They all have different audiences. But it's, again, analysts, people buy their reports. Reporters, people subscribe to their publications. Influencers get followed. So it's all similar. It's making sure that people don't ignore an important part of the mix, because in my view, they're all equally as important to each other.
Yeah,
Have you got any thoughts on that, Jamie, in terms of how do you focus mainly on the influencers and it's kind of separate people managing your journalists and analysts, or because a lot of people are kind of putting B2B influencer marketing within analyst relations now, and that's really something that has shifted, I think, in terms of people's internal business units.
Yeah, I mean, so my role, I think, more falls, I think, under what kind of the more main focus, right, of what you said, right? So it's more of kind of really initiating what the strategy is and then helping to implement it. But I do see that it could be in different ways and in different kind of areas for sure. But I do see, to Sal's point and in yours, the evolvement of it and, what they'll start to ask for, so when it does start to succeed in the sense of they'll start seeing things in their feeds, right, that they want to be part of and want to initiate that conversation with. So I think that's kind of what I'm looking for as well. So in my role, I'm not only looking for the program to succeed, but also for the different, parts of our program to succeed. And I think, Sal, you obviously oversee that larger part of how we kind of connect these pieces together, where I'm looking to make sure that we're not missing the pieces that we have started in the conversation per se.
And I should just ask, because Joel mentioned, asked you a question in the comments, and because you were obviously speaking very fondly of him, so I thought I'd bring him up. He said, did you have any trouble convincing members of the ELT program that influencer marketing would benefit them personally?
Did I have any trouble? To be quite honest, I did not, but I set up separate meetings with all of them. I had, a deck all created, right, and ready for them. I had everything very well organized. And then I also set up, I worked with Joel really closely to have some beautiful faces and names and, have the influencers part of the plan as we talked to them. But not only did I do that, what I had asked Joel to do was, set me up with that to get them to be comfortable with it. But then, that next step really is, where are we going with this and where are we going to go? So I think it was really just, you have to make sure that you don't just have a meeting ad hoc. You don't just explain it to them, yeah, you should do this, that you're prepared, that you have a deck that makes sense to them, and that you lay out appropriately how it will really help engage the brand and themselves, their own brand equity. I think it's really important that you, like I said, it's not an ad hoc conversation. This is a very important conversation. And if you do it wrong, it could go wrong, right? And they could say, no, I'm not going to do this. They have very little time. Think about that. I mean, the time they have is so minimal. I mean, you have to talk to one person to talk to another person to get, fortunately, our executive team, though, they are so responsive. And I have to say, in other organizations, I've not always had that opportunity. So I've been very fortunate here. But yeah, to Joel's point, it could have been a much harder game. But I think if you go in and you're very well organized and you explain to them. And then one thing I did ask from Joel that I almost forgot, Joel, was when I explained to them, the one thing I wanted to make sure that was completely important and very well done was exactly what things meant from your program, right? So when I presented to my executive leadership team, I asked Joel, I said, what does this score mean in your voice? What does Analytica think this score means from an engagement perspective, from, a ranking perspective? Because let me tell you something, they already have 18 different questions in their head they're going to ask you. And if you can't answer the same way that Analytica answers, then I honestly don't have the business to be even working with you. I think it's important for me to make sure that I'm explaining the program appropriately, that we're working appropriately, and they can feel completely 100% comfortable within working within that program. So for me, that was something that I said to Joel. I said, I'm not actually going to speak to any of them until I know exactly what all of this stuff means. So, and how I can really, really deliver this so that it's successful. So yeah, I mean, that was a core component, and we did a lot of back and forth, but I'd rather ask 18 billion questions and get that conversation right than to ask, two, and then for them to just be very ill educated on it and just pass it over. So that was something that was really important to us.
Well, I think that's very smart to first of all engage them one-to-one, but also to be prepared and to be able to know the impact, because a lot of people aren't familiar with social media or the analytics that are just a lot of different scores, and it's also like what good looks like in the industry, because they're obviously competitive with other people, right? And so I think that was very smart. I think Joel was just fishing for another compliment, to be honest.
I think it was too.
Yeah, exactly. So so we should move on. I would love to hear, Sal, what you think, how you think the future of influence marketing is going to evolve over the next couple of years. Hopefully your point about everyone being human is still true in 20 years, and that people haven't been that we're not talking to robots, or influence marketing has turned into something like that way in the future. But what do you think are the immediate trends? Either the channels in terms of creating content, or like how the practice is going to evolve, because it's relatively nascent. Over the past like 5 or 6 years, B2B influencer marketing has really like been on the rise.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's only going to grow, because I do think it is nascent. When I talk to some of my friends and other colleagues, many of them don't have an influencer program yet. So they're quite surprised that you can have a pretty advanced influencer program. And I think a lot of people confuse kind of influencer with the consumer influencers, right? The Kardashians and those types of people, where there wouldn't be a natural fit for a business. But again, working with people like Harold, who, like you said, was on, and others.
And there's Peggy Smedley is hey Peggy, great to see you as well.
Yeah, so again, working with those types of influencers, that they have a very focused follower group, and so again, trying to identify those, I think it's just going to become more specialized, and again, I expect it to keep growing in the next couple of years.
Great. And Jamie, what about the channels that you create content on? Because you talked about the sort of TV and media, sort of radio shows, and you getting your hundreds of millions of potential views. Obviously, LinkedIn and Twitter are two big channels for you. How do you see things evolving with a kind of medium in which you create content?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Sal does a lot more of the media stuff than I do. He handles kind of more of that side of things, but from like an actual social channel kind of perspective, I definitely I see, LinkedIn is obviously going to be always a core component of ours, right? I see Instagram actually being really kind of a core component of what we really need to be more part of, right? So I think that that's something, and just evolving the dynamic of our content as well, right? When we work with influencers, not just thinking of a static kind of content, right? It's really thinking dynamic. I want things that will really make sense to who we're evolving with. So that's where I feel like we're going to be going. Twitter is obviously also another component, but I really actually feel like Instagram is going to be kind of the more deeper dive of what we're going to be kind of moving into from that perspective of a channels.
And would you say TikTok for B2B is going to be really prominent? Are you using it, or are you using that kind of content creation but then promoting on LinkedIn? How's that conversation gone down internally?
TikTok. That's always a question. We're actually thinking of piloting almost a TikTok program, but it's going to be more for a humanistic touch, right, for a culture of kind of what we're thinking to pilots. But I think, an influencer opportunity might be a good place there. Who knows? I think it's also a good place for them to kind of speak to us or talk to us about culture, or, the Ever Workplace. There's a lot of different ways that we could evolve it. But I'm not really quite sure of how to utilize, TikTok and influencer together. So maybe we'll have to pick your Joel brain a little bit more, so you guys can help us out, get us there. But yeah, hopefully we'll evolve to that. I just think at the moment, we're just thinking of a piloting opportunity at this point.
Yeah, no, I think when I speak to a lot of brands, it's not something that everyone's doing. It's a question on everyone's mind. With Reddit, Instagram, TikTok. Um, but I think people are experimenting a bit. But I don't think that anyone's got the kind of strategy which is rolled out and it's always on. In terms of B2B. But it's definitely worth considering um, on that. So it seems like from speaking to both of you that your program's been running for about 4 or 5 years. It really does feel like that. Um, but I know that it's only been up and running for about kind of 6 months or so. Um, so what, Sal, to your point, when a lot of your colleagues or friends haven't got an influencer marketing program, what would be your advice to them when they start? I know you said start small, but what other piece of advice would you give them?
Well, I mean, try to understand, what your goals are. What are you trying to achieve by, don't say, oh, I need influencer program, and then just, you know, what do I do? I mean, again, they need to understand, okay, so who are the audiences I'm trying to speak to? What's the goal I want to communicate to them? What's the story that you want to tell? And again, and what's the best way to tell that story? And, Jamie mentioned earlier, you're going to talk to many influencers where it's just not a good fit, right? So it's meeting the right influencer who is credible, but also has your similar point of view, whose followers, are looking for the information you're trying to provide. So you really need to think through the influencer program. It's just not simply just, I need one. You need to really have goals, et cetera. And again, that's where Analytic can really help, any organization.
And Jamie, you talked a lot about you're thinking about when you're engaging an influencer, what is the opportunity potentially a year down the line? I think a lot of people engage influencers for kind of like a one-off campaign, but you're clearly thinking long term. How would you provide or give advice in terms of how people can build those long-term relationships with influencers? What are some of the tactics that you can you can carry out to be able to get that engagement from people that don't have to work with you?
Well, I always say, you just got to be happy go lucky. No, I'm joking. I think it's also about your energy, right? And how much you believe in the company. Because if they can feel that, I think it's very apparent if they want to or do not want to work with you. I also think it's important for you to know where you're going to be in 6 to 12 months. Perfect example, Tim. I'm starting to kind of tease out, even with some influencers that we're working with, about, we're kind of reshaping and rethinking the podcast that we're doing. Perfect example. And where they might be a good fit in, right? So always having those little teasers of where else they could kind of fit in, right? Not just you're working with us now, it's, hey, we also have something really exciting coming up that maybe you could be part of. I don't know. And I think that that's something is kind of fun too, right? Because every person wants to be part of something that's elite, right? That's they're not part of, right? If you even think of the crazy like NFT world and all of that, right? People want to be part of something that they can't be part of yet, right? So I think that something that you should always think about in your kind of little bag of tricks is where else you could see them. Don't just think of them in one area. Make them feel like you want to spend more time with them, right? Like I always bring it back to this dating relationship. I always joke with Joel, it's like a dating app sometimes, right in the beginning. Make sure that they feel the love, right? That they don't feel like, yeah, you had a date with them and it was great, and then you never call them back, right? This is that next step in the dating relationship, right? You call them back, you go on another dinner date, and maybe there'll be a podcast included. I don't know, but I think it's important to give them that love, and let them know that you're also thinking forward thinking, and they want to be part of something like that. So to me, it's really just making sure that you have extra things. Don't just give them one story. Make sure that they see the value in your brand too, because they're going to want to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. So
Yeah, I can imagine a blog post that you could write, Jamie, in terms of the sort of dating analogy and what a fourth or fifth date brings, like
Mhm.
podcast plus
Mhm.
podcast plus a LinkedIn Live and Twitter chat on your fifth date,
Mhm.
and then helping to reshape some of the brand narrative. Um, I think that could be quite a fun blog post if you're going back to writing. But I love that. I love the energy and passion that you bring, but also putting out some potential collaborations in the future to kind of see how they could help you shape things. I think that's really smart, because a lot of people are so besotted on what to do in the next 5 to 10 weeks, that and don't call them back, right? And so it does become that one-off paid engagement where I know hundreds of influencers that some of them get paid, some of them don't get paid, and some of them get paid but also want to do other stuff to help the brand. So you've really tapped into that, which I think is really smart. So in terms of measurement, because we have talked about measurement and sort of touched upon that, I'd love to just ask you what the key metrics are that you use to measure the success of your program. When someone brings you into a room, I don't think people do that anymore. Obviously, join an online meeting and said, okay, can you tell me why this has been successful? What are the top line metrics that you demonstrate to someone that maybe wouldn't be too familiar with the program?
Yeah, I can start with this one. So some of the things we actually have for our KPIs really is the reach, right? So what the potential reach could be. So where we are currently to date. And then I always think of a current and a future state, right? So where are you currently? I never like to knock where we are, right? So whatever your company has done, I think it's really important you have those KPI conversations too, especially with for management. Never knock what's happened, right? You never know. And what predecessor worked really hard to get you to where you are. So I think it's really important when you have that conversation to never say what wasn't working, but where your current state is. Just something that I feel like always works and keeps the conversation more positive rather than negative. And then, where does that future state look like? And so for me, that future state is never, ever, I've never put a specific number, because you never want to say, I can guarantee you 18 million point 6, 555, right? And then you come in at like 16. I always like to do a percentage, right? So quarter over quarter, as you start to think about, those QBR decks, we have them internally, right? You can say, hey, I've grown 2 to 5%. Well, 2 to 5% is 20% year over year, right? So it might feel kind of small quarter over quarter, but making sure that when you actually think about your KPIs, they're very specific, almost like when you're doing your SMART goals, and everyone does those, right? Personally, think really specific, but think really achievable and how you can show that success, right? And for me, that makes me feel comfortable too every quarter, right? When I have to report out, right? So my key measurements really are that reach, that increase year over year by a percentage. And I do it quarter by quarter and then year over year. And then really it's, that engagement. Engagement actually is so much more important to me in a different format, right? Because like I said, you go by that sign, especially all of us who've worked in marketing so many times, that feeling, right? You go by that sign and you see that guy and you're like, oh yeah, that guy, Mike, right? But you go by that sign and you're like, Mike, oh yeah, I had a conversation with him last week. Oh, I got to call him, right? It's an engagement. It's a very different kind of opportunity in marketing, right? So for me, I think engagement means more than reach does, because that means that they're involved. That's that business to human touch you're having, you're connecting with. So for me, when I really show my key metrics, I always highlight that, how important that is. Because engagement is a part of adoption, right? So you're adopting a concept and you're engaging. You're not just seeing a concept. So that's very important to me. So that's 2 of my core KPIs. Obviously, we have other KPIs that we measure, but those are my top ones. And that's really how I would say, if you're going to line it out for a business unit, those are the key things you're trying to achieve. And then, of course, we have our executive KPIs we also measure as well, that have tactics based upon our influencer marketing program. So it just depends on how you do it. So we have an overarching one, obviously, that kind of roll into Sal's overarching main goals. Then we have KPIs that roll into kind of our different programs that we're running as well.
Great. And it sounds like the program's doing extremely well. I know that internally it's it's really successful. So I imagine you're just looking at your metrics and smiling at the moment, Sal.
I am. Our Everywhere Workplace report was a huge hit.
Yeah, and it just, because it was such a wonderful piece of research, do you have any advice on tactically on how to leverage influencers when you produce research? Because a lot of companies produce research and then just looking for for people to promote them. But I know that you sort of integrated influencers a bit earlier on in the process. So I'd love to hear your advice on how to do that, because sometimes it's hard to get in there during the content creation phase, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and again, luckily I own that kind of area as well, and so I've always done research as part of my job, is creating these thought leadership reports. And so, kind of with this one, I wanted to come up with new ways. What other expert opinions can we get in there? And right now, the most credible experts, or some of the most credible experts, are some of the influencers, right? They're credible online, that you know, they have their own roles and jobs, etc. And I just wanted to build in what their point of view was for the everywhere workplace. You know, again, that's Avanti's key area, is we want to be perceived as the experts in the everywhere workplace, but understanding what other experts are saying, what they think of our findings, etc., just made it a much more interesting report. Because again, everyone gets numbers and research, but again, building in other points of view and other opinions, I think just makes it much more readable and interesting.
Great, and I think that really plays to your authentic long-term relationships you've talked about as well. Thank you so much for this chat. I know that we're I know that we're past time. I could speak to you for hours and hours about your program. I love the energy and the spirit, and I love the fact that it's centralized and you're just thinking big, and but not thinking too short-termist as well, which I think is a really great thing to achieve. So thank you so much for joining us on one of our customer chats, and you know, please do so jump on the comments afterwards and engage with some of the people. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to both of you.
Perfect. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.